Howdy folks. In this lesson, what we're going to focus on is we're going to take all the things that we've learned in the last couple lessons and we're going to put them together so that we can understand markets and how they behave. And so I'm naming this lesson Market Forces, Dynamics, and Efficiency. And these are the three main topics that we're going to cover regarding how markets behave when supply and demand come together. Now what I've done here over on this side is I've summarized what we did in the last lesson. I've summarized all the different things that the things that we care about in this class. There's probably hundreds of more things, but these are the main categories of things that change demand. And so it would be a good idea for you to review these. And then over here, I have summarized the things that change supply and shift the supply curve. So why don't you start with reviewing those? If you want to pause the video, that can be really helpful. All right, so let's start off by talking about market forces. And one of the first things you need to understand when thinking about market forces is that suppliers prefer a higher price. Suppliers always prefer a higher price because they're the ones receiving money. And so they would like for the price to be as high as possible. But demanders, unfortunately, for suppliers anyway, demanders always prefer a lower price because they're the ones giving up money. So they'd rather give up less money for something they're getting than give up more money for something they're getting. And so this is related to the idea of opportunity cost, because the price of buying a product, the money that the demanders are giving up to get that stuff is their opportunity cost. And therefore they want the opportunity cost to be lower if they can. Now the suppliers are giving up a product, and so their opportunity cost is the product that they created that they're giving up. And so if they're going to give it up, then they would like to be getting something better, and that's why they want a higher price. So demanders prefer a lower price because the money is what they're giving up, and suppliers prefer a higher price because money is what they're getting when they give up something else. Okay, so if you can understand this idea that suppliers always prefer a higher price and demanders always prefer a lower price, then it's going to be really easy to understand market forces. Now, because of this, and we also know that when we have a market graph here with supply and demand, that the price is in the market is what the suppliers and demanders ultimately agree upon. Regardless of what their quantities are, the buyers and the sellers have to agree upon this price before anything will be exchanged. Now, sometimes in the market, I'm going to go ahead and put in here the equilibrium price. And we learned that in the last session, that the equilibrium price, so P sub E, the equilibrium price is always the price where the supply curve intersects the demand curve. Now sometimes in a market, the actual price in the market will be higher than the equilibrium price. So let's say, let me make this, actually go ahead and draw a solid line over. Let's say that the price in the market is higher than the equilibrium price. So I'm going to put price sub H for price higher. Okay. Now at a higher price than equilibrium, you can see here that quantity demanded, this is quantity demanded, and over here this is going to indicate quantity supplied. And quantity supplied is now higher than quantity demanded. So in the case of a surplus, and that's what we mentioned in the last lesson, that this indicates a surplus. The reason that there will be a surplus is because quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. So what's happening here is the suppliers are saying, hey, we've got stuff that you want to buy. And the demanders are saying, yeah, we want to buy it all right, and we'll buy more of it at a lower price. We prefer a lower price. I'm sure you're all happy that the price is high, but we are only willing to buy this much of it at this price. So, demanders put pressure on the price. This is a force in the market. The demanders are a force in the market. And they're putting pressure on the price, saying to the suppliers, if you want to sell more to us, then you're going to need to decrease the price, and then we'll buy more. And that's why when the price is higher than equilibrium price, there is downward pressure in the market. In the situation of a surplus, there will be downward pressure on the price. Demanders put downward pressure on the price because they're only willing to buy more. And if the suppliers don't allow that price to go down, then they're just going to sit around with lots of extra stuff. They're going to have a surplus that they're not going to be able to sell. And we call this is our first indicator, we call this an inefficiency in the market. So having all this extra stuff that they're willing to produce, but demanders are not willing to buy, that is an inefficiency in the market. Okay? So now let's look at the other situation. Let's say that we have the situation where the price is too low. All right? So now let's say that we have a price in the market that is lower than the equilibrium price. Well, at a price that's too low, demanders, they're like, well, they're loving this. They're like, we will buy anything that you make. We will buy it all. So demanders are saying, we want a really high quantity over here, but the suppliers are saying the price is too low. Our costs are such that we cannot produce more than what we're producing right now. And so in the case of a shortage, and remember we said this in the last lesson, that this indicates a shortage in the market. In the case of a shortage, or a shortage is defined as a situation where quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded. So now the buyers are like, please, please give us more. We want to buy more of this stuff. But suppliers are saying, no, that's how much we're making. That's how much you're buying. So only so many people, not enough buyers are going to be satisfied with what's supplied. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this in the last lesson, that this brings about discrimination in the market. Now the suppliers have to come up with something other than price as a reason to sell to somebody, because some people are going to get and some people are going to go without. And so this could bring up racial discrimination, age discrimination, nepotism, all kinds of stuff, because the suppliers only have so much to sell. So here's where the suppliers wind up having power here. Suppliers are going to put upward pressure on the price. Upward pressure on the price in the market. Because what they're saying is the suppliers are saying, look, if you want more, we will make more at a higher price. So there's upward pressure on the price to return to equilibrium. And so in either case, in the case of a surplus or a shortage, it's downward pressure in a surplus and upward pressure in a shortage in the market. And in all cases, it is always pressure to return to equilibrium. And then as the price returns to equilibrium price, quantity supplied, in the case of a shortage, will increase, quantity demanded will decrease, and then finally, suppliers and demanders will agree. quantity supplied will be equal to quantity demanded, and we will be at equilibrium quantity. Suppliers and demanders will agree on the quantity, and it's not that everyone will be happy, it's that there won't be any more incentive for either the suppliers or the demanders to increase or decrease the price. So equilibrium price is that sweet spot, that price where the demanders, enough demanders are happy with how low the price is, and enough suppliers are happy with how high the price is. So the whole thing about market forces, what we're now going to see for the rest of the lesson over and over and over again, is I'm going to be talking about, there's going to be downward pressure on the price, there's going to be upward pressure on the price, because the market is constantly trying, without any government involvement, the suppliers and the demanders are trying to, in their own interests, move the price, and it winds up being in a place that we call equilibrium. Okay, so that is what I mean when I say market forces. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about what happens to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity when we have some kind of change in demand or a change in supply. Now there's only 4 possibilities. There's only 4 things that can happen in a market. Now we're going ceteris paribus. We are not going to change more than one thing at a time. We're going to hold all other things constant while we change one thing at a time. And so we're going to look at what happens if the only thing that changes is an increase in demand. Then we're going to look at what happens if the only thing that happens is a decrease in demand. And then similarly, increase in supply, and then decrease in supply. So, if there was some sort of increase in demand, and here's a whole bunch of list of things that could result in an increase or a decrease in demand. So if one of these things, for example, if the price of a complement good goes down, that results in an increase in demand. Similarly, if the number of buyers in the market increases, that's also going to result in an increase in demand. So an increase in demand, one of the things that we learned in the last lesson is that an increase in demand results in a right shift. A right shift of the demand curve. And so this demand curve is going to shift to the right. Now here, currently, our starting equilibrium price we'll put right here. So this is PES for start, and our equilibrium quantity is going to be here. This is going to be QE and then S for start. Okay, so equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So I'm going to switch over to a different color. I'm going to use a blue marker to show the changes that are occurring. So when demand increases, that's going to be a rightward shift of the demand curve. So this demand curve is going to move over here. It's morphing because something, a third variable that's not on the graph, has changed. So it's changing the relationship. It's completely changing the demand relationship between price and quantity. So let's say that it moves over here. And we're going to call that D prime. And so when this happens, if this is the price, the new equilibrium price is here. So we're going to put P sub E, and I'll put an N for new, so pen. Equilibrium price new, and down here is going to be equilibrium quantity new. Okay? Now, what happens if demand shifts, but the price stays down here? If the price stays down here, then quantity supplied is not changing at all. Quantity supplied is right here, but because of the new demand curve, demanders want more. So now we have quantity demanded is over here, and quantity supplied is all the way over here where it was originally. See, suppliers didn't feel a change in the market. Suppliers are just doing what they're doing. Remember, ceteris paribus, the suppliers, nothing in supply has changed. The only thing that has changed is in demand. And therefore, suppliers at that price are still producing the same amount that they were producing before. But now demanders, they want more of the product. Well, look at this triangle in here. What kind of triangle is that? That's a shortage, right? Because it's the triangle below the new equilibrium price. So there's a shortage in the market. So demanders are saying, hey, where's all the stuff? We used to be able to get it, but now we want more of it. And suppliers are saying, sorry, this is how much we're going to make at this price. Price has always been the same. We're going to keep making the same amount. If you want more, you're going to need to give us a little more money for what it is we're making. Then we'll make more. And so that's going to create an upward pressure on the price, and there is going to be an increase in equilibrium price. So the equilibrium price is going to go up. Now, when the price goes up, several of the demanders are now going to are going to say, okay, well, now that the price is higher, we can't afford it as much. So they're going to back off of the quantity demanded a little bit, right? But now that equilibrium price has gone up, we now have a new equilibrium quantity. And so now what we used to have, this used to be, remember, quantity supplied and quantity demanded were down here. But now that the price has gone up, we are now going to have an increase in quantity supplied and an increase in quantity demanded. And so when we have a rightward shift of the demand curve, we're going to have an increase in equilibrium price, and we're also going to have an increase in equilibrium quantity. Okay? And so that is our first situation. Now in this situation, the demand curve is going to shift to the left, because in this case we're having a decrease in demand. And what's going to cause a decrease in demand? I don't know, well, let's say it was an inferior good and income went up. So now people are buying the good stuff and they're not buying inferior goods anymore. So the demand for an inferior good is going to go down. Well, that is going to result in a left shift. A left shift of the demand curve. And so that's going to look like this. So now the demand curve is, well, let me use a different color. We'll use orange here. So now the demand curve is going to shift to the left. And we're going to call that D double prime. So we have a leftward shift of the demand curve. Well, you can see now when that happens that we have a new equilibrium point here. A new equilibrium price. Price equilibrium is new. And we have a new equilibrium quantity. Quantity equilibrium new. And so what are we looking at here? Well, if the price stayed the same, if demand shifted to the left and the price stayed the same at equilibrium, you're going to see a decrease here. This is the new amount that that demanders want, but suppliers are still supplying the same amount. So all of a sudden, suppliers, they're still supplying the same amount, and they're thinking to themselves, hey, how come nobody's buying this stuff? They've been buying this stuff for months, and now nobody's buying it. It's because demand went down. It's because there was a change in demand, a decrease in demand. The demand curve shifted to the left, and now buyers do not want as much. And now look at this triangle here. This is a triangle above the new equilibrium price, so that is a surplus. And because they're now in a surplus, because quantity demanded is smaller than quantity supplied, the demanders are going to say, look, if you want us to buy more of this stuff that you keep making that we don't want, then you're going to have to lower the price. And so there is downward pressure, market forces, downward pressure on the price, and the price will now decrease. When the price decreases, suppliers will now produce less, and buyers from where they were where they just were will want a little bit more, and they now agree on a quantity, a new equilibrium quantity that is what? Less than what it used to be. Look, so we had a decrease, that's a terrible arrow. That's a little better. We had a decrease in equilibrium quantity, and we also had a decrease in equilibrium price. So when demand decreases in an economy, when one of these things changes over here, that leads to a decrease in demand, the demand curve is going to shift to the left, and then we are going to have a decrease in equilibrium price. We are also going to have a decrease in equilibrium quantity. All right, so now let's look at what happens if there's some sort of change in supply. What if supply changes? How's that going to affect the price and quantity in the market? All right, well, let's create a supply curve here. Let's create a demand curve here. And so now, let me grab this purple marker maybe. Something happens to increase supply. Well, what's going to cause an increase in supply? Well, maybe production costs went down, and now we have an increase in supply. Or let's say there's some sort of beneficial supply shock that leads to an increase in supply. Or taxes went down. That's going to cause an increase in supply. So when supply increases, that's going to result in a right shift of the supply curve. And when the supply curve shifts to the right, it'll look like this, and we'll call that S prime. So a rightward shift of the supply curve. Now, originally, before the change in supply, now that's a change in supply, right? That's a change in supply. Originally, the equilibrium price was over here, and now the original equilibrium quantity was right here. So that's the starting equilibrium price and the starting equilibrium quantity. But now, supply has increased and has shifted to the right. And now, the new equilibrium price is here. Equilibrium price new, right? Now, at that new equilibrium price, where are we? If we stayed at the original price up here, suppliers would take advantage of the situation and just keep producing. They would increase their production. But demanders would say, hey, with the at that price, why are you making more stuff? We still want to buy this amount. And so what we would wind up having is a surplus in the market, because suppliers, in their premature haste, are taking advantage of their lower costs. Their production costs have gone down, so they're like, hey, our costs have gone down. Let's make a whole bunch more stuff and just sell it at the same price. But buyers are saying, hey, you can't do that. You can't just make more stuff and sell it at a higher price. You can't just make more stuff at the same price. Sure, we would love that, but here's the thing, is at this price, they're already selling to all the buyers that want to buy. They're making extra stuff, and no one wants to buy their extra stuff because all the buyers at the current price are already happy. So if the supplier produces more stuff, they're going to have to try and reel in new buyers that haven't already been buying this quantity. And the only way they can get those new buyers is if they lower the price. So those new buyers are saying, sure, we do want your stuff. We are willing and able to buy your stuff at a lower price. Willing and able, but at a lower price. So if you bring the price down, so the market forces put pressure on the price to reduce the price, and then we have a new equilibrium price. And when we have a new equilibrium price, what happens is this, it's now here, this now becomes the happy medium. This becomes the quantity that suppliers are willing to sell for and buyers are willing to buy for. So ultimately, we will have a decrease in price, but an increase in equilibrium quantity. So when the supply increases, we're going to have a decrease in equilibrium price, but we're going to have an increase in equilibrium quantity. Now, in my opinion, as a knowledgeable business person or consumer and economist. In my opinion, this is the best right here. Prices went down and we got more stuff. That is awesome. I don't care who you are. Everybody wants to produce more stuff but have a lower price. Well, suppliers would love to produce more stuff and have a higher price. But think about it. The suppliers are still people. They still want to go out and buy cheaper stuff, right? For the overall economy, this is a really good thing. Prices are going down, but the quantity we're able to buy is going up. All right, now let's look at our last one of this quadrant. Let's look at a decrease in supply. So we'll draw a new supply curve and a new demand curve here. All right, so let's say that this is the original supply curve and this is the original demand curve. So here's our starting equilibrium price and here's our starting equilibrium quantity. All right, and now what's going to happen in the market, I think I'm going to grab a red marker here. Now what we're going to have in the economy is a decrease in supply. Why a decrease in supply? I don't know. Maybe they raised the minimum wage. Wages went up, so supply went down. That's what's going to happen. Well, that's assuming wages go up when they raise the minimum wage. So if the government raises the federal minimum wage, then in the economy, if overall wages then go up, which is what I think people want to happen when they increase the minimum wage, that's going to cause a decrease in supply because costs for the business are going up. And so a decrease in supply is indicated on the market graph by a left shift of the supply curve. So this supply curve is going to shift to the left, and this is now going to be our new supply curve. We'll call that S double prime. And so now, since supply has decreased, look, at this old price, suppliers are like, whoa, 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 slow down production. We can't afford to make as much as we used to be able to make. We got to bring back production, and this now, just temporarily, theoretically in our minds, would be our new production for quantity supplied. But demanders are saying, well, we still want to buy this much. Well, look at this triangle right here. This triangle is below the new equilibrium point, and so therefore that triangle indicates a shortage. And because it's a shortage, suppliers are now going to say, look, we will go back to making more for you to buy, but only if you are willing to raise the price. And so this puts upward pressure on price, and our new equilibrium price is now higher than our starting equilibrium price. When the price goes up, some of the buyers are going to back off from what they used to buy, and now we're going to have a new agreement between suppliers and buyers, a new equilibrium quantity. And so you can see here that this is going to result in a decrease in equilibrium quantity. So in a market, if something happened that caused a decrease in supply, the supply curve would shift to the left, and what we would see in the market, the result of this decrease in supply would be an increase in the price, in the equilibrium price, but a decrease in equilibrium quantity. Okay? There's going to be at least a few questions on any quiz or test that you take that's going to reflect what you see right here. You have to know this. And really, you don't have to memorize the chart if you understand the graph. But if you like charts better than graphs, that's okay with me. However you learn it is helpful for you. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into, I'm going to give you kind of a flow chart or a model of how the dynamic occurs when there's a change in the market. So I've made this flow chart that can kind of help you. If you put this in your notes, you can kind of understand and distinguish between a change in supply versus a change in quantity supplied, and a change in demand versus a change in quantity demanded. Now this is basically a flow chart that shows the dynamics of the market when there is a change. See, typically the very first thing that happens is there is a third variable change, not price, not quantity. Okay, it's either the price of a related good, the popularity of the product, the costs of the supplier, taxes are changing, people expect the price in the future to change, number of buyers changes in the market, the income of consumers changes. Okay, so some third variable not represented on the market graph changes. That leads to either a change in supply or a change in demand. If it's one of these on this side, it's a change in demand. If it's one of these on this side, it's a change in supply. So that's why when let's say a test asks you, hey, this happens, is the result going to be a change in supply or a change in quantity supplied? Well, if it was one of these third variables, over here, then it resulted in a change in supply. Now, after the change in supply or the change in demand, excuse me, it's going to shift one of the curves. There's going to be a curve shift. So when supply changes, then the supply curve is going to shift right or left. Or if it was a change in demand, the demand curve is going to shift either right or left. After the curve shifts on the graph, what's going to happen is market forces are then going to push a change in price. Like we said just a few minutes ago, that one of the suppliers or demanders are going to be like, hey, let's do new things, let's make things great. And the other party says, I'm staying right where I'm at. If you want things to change, you're going to have to change the price, increase or decrease the price. And so the market forces, they pressure either upward force on price or downward force in price. Then after the price changes, then we have a change in quantity supplied and a change in quantity demanded. And like I said in the last lesson, change in quantity supplied and change in quantity demanded only happens when there is a change in price. And that change in price will happen when there is a shift of one of the curves. And a curve will shift when there's a change in supply or demand, and there will be a change in supply or demand when there is a change in a third variable. And so what I want to do now is I want to go to the market graph here, and I want to look at some possible shifts and how they would ultimately affect change in quantity supplied and change in quantity demanded. All right, so let's take this curve, or this flow chart here, and here's our market graph. And let's just take a sample. Let's just look at a few of these items and maybe a few of these items and follow this flow chart to see exactly what's going to happen. So let's select, let's say the popularity. Let's start with the popularity. Let's say the popularity of this product, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, but let's say that this is a normal good. Let's say that this is a normal good. All right. Now, I want to mention something. I know that up here, income affects normal goods and inferior goods differently, but it's important that you understand that none of these other dynamics, none of these other changes cares whether the product is normal or inferior. Only income cares whether the product is normal or inferior. Okay, so even if it's a normal good, it's still going to be affected the same way by popularity. It's not like if it becomes popular, all of a sudden people are going to buy less of it. No, you can have an inferior good that becomes very popular and lots of people want to buy it. It's just they're able to buy it on a low income, which is awesome for them. Or for me if I'm the one buying it. So let's say that the popularity of whatever this good is becomes less. Something happens that makes people not want to buy it anymore. Therefore, a decrease in popularity is going to lead to a decrease in demand. So, popularity changed, leading to a decrease in demand, right? Which is going to shift the demand curve left, right? So we're going to have a leftward shift of the demand curve. So now we're going to call that D prime. And now, this was the equilibrium price, but now we can look at our intersection point of the new demand curve and the supply curve. It's at a lower point. And so what we're going to have is, we're going to have downward pressure, equilibrium price new, downward pressure. So we're going to have a decrease in the price. And similarly, now if we look at this, where is the new intersection on quantity? Well, that's right here. And therefore, the new equilibrium quantity is going to be to the left. And so now, after we have a decrease in price, we're going to have a change in quantity supplied, which is going to be a decrease in quantity supplied and a decrease in quantity demanded. So we have a change in quantity supplied and a change in quantity demanded. And now, after that happens, this now becomes the new normal for that market. It's the new normal for that market. And now that market is just going to sit around and wait until another change occurs, like a change in costs or a change in number of buyers. Now, what's really interesting is, to me, this is just an aside, this one's free, is if we keep shifting the demand curve to the left, and let's say that the supply curve keeps shifting to the left, to the point where either the price is really high and quantity is low, or the price is really low and quantity is low, if quantity gets low enough, that product won't have a market anymore. They'll just stop making it and stop selling it. So we're back to our original position. Now, let's say that we have some sort of supply chain change, let's say that over here, supply, let's say that we have a decrease in taxes. So business taxes go down. The government, changes some of the tax code, and so now businesses pay fewer taxes than they used to. Well, that's going to result in an increase in supply. So the change in taxes, a decrease in taxes, is going to cause a change in supply, not a change in quantity supplied. The change in taxes is going to cause a change in supply, the whole force of supply in this market. Then, and it's going to be an increase in supply. So that increase in supply, the increase in supply is going to cause a rightward shift of the supply curve. So the supply curve is going to shift over to the right, and we're going to call that S prime. Now, with the new position of the supply curve, that's now going to cause pressure on the price in the market. See here, there's the new intersection, and so buyers and sellers are going to negotiate with each other here, and ultimately, in order for both of them to agree on a quantity, the price is going to have to go down. So we're going to have a new equilibrium price. So the price is going to go down, and then over here we can see that there's going to be a change in the equilibrium quantity, and equilibrium quantity is going to go up. So ultimately what happens because of this shift of the curve is that we wind up having a decrease in the price of the product. There's a change in price. And then when the price changes, there's going to be now a change in quantity supplied and a change in quantity demanded. So quantity supplied is going to go up and quantity demanded is going to go up. And both sellers and buyers are going to agree on the price and agree on the quantity. Okay, let's do maybe just a couple more examples, and then we'll move on to the last thing that we're going to talk about. All right, so we got this. Okay. All right, let's stick with supply over here. Let's say that that the price of a major input, like a raw material, the price of a raw material goes up. So let's say there's a company like lumber. Let's say there's a company that buys trees. They buy, and then they turn the trees into lumber. Well, now the trees are going to cost money because something happened. Could be because gas prices went up, and the trucks that drive the trees over to the mill now those companies have to pay more money, so they're going to charge the mill more money to buy their trees. And so the price of buying a bunch of trees to turn into lumber has gone up, and therefore the supply of lumber is going to go down. So the price of an input, the price of land, of a factor of production has gone up. That's going to be a change in supply, and it's going to decrease supply. So supply is going to decrease. That's going to be a left shift of the supply curve. So it's going to shift over to the left here. S double prime, let's call it. And so what's now going to happen is that the buyers and sellers are going to renegotiate the quantity and the price. The original price and quantity is no longer good because the market has changed. And so they're going to negotiate a higher price in the market. So the price is going to go up. And then when the price goes up, that's obviously going to affect a change in quantity supplied and a change in quantity demanded. And ultimately, both of those things are going to go down. We're going to have a new equilibrium quantity, which is smaller than the old equilibrium quantity. And we're going to have a decrease in quantity supplied and a decrease in quantity demanded. Okay? Let's do just one more example over here. Let's do, because students really struggle with the idea of a complement or a substitute, let's do one of those problems. So if I were you, I'd put a lot of effort into understanding substitutes and complements, because I don't know why students struggle with it so much. Basically, the idea is this, is if the price of something that goes with this good increases, now I don't want to buy the complement anymore because its price went up. And if I'm not buying the complement, I also don't want to buy this product anymore either. I don't want to have a whole bunch of peanut butter without having a bunch of jelly. And because they go together, if I stop buying one, because here's the thing, if the price goes up on jelly, I'm going to decrease my quantity demanded. In fact, maybe I should make a whole separate, let's do this. I think this is going to help you a little bit. Let's say that this is the market for dip. This is the market for dip, like chips and dip, like French onion dip or something like that. And over here, I'm going to make a little one here. There's a quantity and a price. And this is the market for chips, okay? And so we have a supply and a demand for chips. Now, try to follow along here. The dip market is fine. They're happy. They've got their supply, they've got their demand, everything's fine. But over here in the chip market, let's say that something happens to let's say the supply of chips. Okay, let's say that the price of corn goes up, or the price of wheat goes up, or the price of preservatives goes up. I don't know what it is. But some input, the price of some input goes up in the chip market, and so the supply curve shifts to the left. And now we have S prime. Well, this is the old price, equilibrium price. Now look, the equilibrium price in that market has gone up. And now that the equilibrium price has gone, or now that the price has gone up, the quantity demanded is going to go down. We're going to have a decrease in quantity demanded. We used to demand this much, now we demand this much. Quantity demanded has gone down. So now we're buying less chips. When we buy less chips, are we going to buy more dip or the same amount of dip? Why would I buy fewer chips and still buy the same amount of dip? If I used to buy 3 bags of chips and 2 things of dip, but now I'm only going to buy 1 bag of chips. Why do I need 2 things of dip for 1 bag of chips? I'm only going to buy 1 package of dip. And therefore, since the price went up in the market of a complement good, the demand for dip is going to go down. We're going to have a decrease. Change in demand, a decrease in demand is going to be a leftward shift of the demand curve. So the demand curve is going to shift over here. That's going to be our new demand curve, D double prime. And ultimately, the price of dip is going to go down, decrease in the price of dip, and we're going to have a decrease in quantity, in equilibrium quantity. Quantity supplied will go down and quantity demanded will go down. Let's do something very similar, only with the substitutes, the price of a substitute. Well, let's do bologna and peanut butter. Okay, we did that before. Only so we'll say that this is peanut butter and this is bologna. You remember us doing that example? All right, so look. So we got the supply of bologna and we've got the demand for bologna. Now, let's say that something happens in the bologna market. For example, let's say the wages go up. They renegotiate their union contract, and when they renegotiate the union contract, the wages have to be increased. So their wages go up, and not just in one company. Let's say it's across the entire industry. In the entire bologna industry, wages go up. Well, an increase in wages results in a decrease in supply. Well, if supply decreases, okay, this was the original price down here. Well, look, the equilibrium price went up. So price increased. Now, when the price increases, people are, this is how much they used to buy. That was the old one. Now the new one is down. So we had a decrease in quantity demanded. So now people are buying less bologna. Why are they buying less bologna? Because the price went up. That's the law of demand, right? A higher price means lower demand. So, because they're not buying bologna, what are they going to do? Are they just going to do without lunch? Or are they going to say, hey, I think I'm just going to fast for lunch every day because bologna is more expensive? No, they're now going to say, what can I have for lunch instead? What is a substitute for bologna? How about peanut butter and jelly? Peanut butter is a substitute for bologna, or peanut butter and jelly. So really, what we're about to see happening in the peanut butter market would also happen probably in the jelly market. We had an increase in the price of a substitute product, which is going to cause a change in demand, and it's going to be an increase in demand. Now people are going to want more peanut butter because they're not buying bologna. That's going to cause a rightward shift of the demand curve. So the demand curve is going to shift to the right. That's our new demand curve. Call it D double prime. And now what's going to happen in the peanut butter market is the price also is going to go up, right? Yeah, I know you're like, well, the price just went up there. They left the bologna market because the price went up. What are they going to do now? Leave the peanut butter market because the price went up? Well, not everybody left that market over there, and not everybody is going to leave this market here. And we don't know by how much the price went up. And then ultimately, that's also going to result in an increase in quantity, in equilibrium quantity. So when we have an increase in demand, the demand curve shifts to the right. That results in an increase in price. It also results in an increase in quantity supplied and an increase in quantity demanded. Also, remember that we're doing this ceteris paribus. So you can't now say, hey, they're going to leave this market because the price went up. We're going with ceteris paribus. We're holding everything constant except for the change in demand here. And the thing that caused the change in demand was a change in price in another market. Okay? But as you can see, if we don't do ceteris paribus, in real life, there is no ceteris paribus in markets. All these things are changing at the same time. And if you can understand how these things are changing at the same time, especially if you're going into, let's say, the stock exchange, oh my goodness, you have to have a strong understanding of markets because it's called the stock market, right? So these dynamics are very important to understand. Now we're going to move on to the last part of this lesson, which is market efficiency. All right, so in this last segment, we're going to talk about market efficiency. Market efficiency is, to me, a pretty simple concept, but there are one or two things concepts that you have to overcome mentally. And once you understand those things, the rest of it's going to be a piece of cake. So let's talk about the first thing. Let's talk about, so if we got this market here, we got a demand curve, we got a supply curve, we've got equilibrium price, we've got equilibrium quantity. All the people who are buying for this price, they're happy. These people over here, they're not buying, right? They need the price to be lower before they will buy. And so they're happy because they're not happy because they're not buying it. They're just happy because they're not paying something for something that they're not willing. they're not getting something and having to pay too much for it. So these people over here, they have a reservation price where if the price goes down, they're happy to buy, but because the price is too high, they don't want to buy at all. But I want to talk about the people on the upward part, this higher part of the demand curve. On this higher part of the demand curve, all of these people are buying. Every single one of these people are buying. But here's the cool thing. They would buy for a higher price. But the price is way down here. But like this person right here, they would buy if the price was higher, if it was up here. They would be okay with that. They would still buy it because they are willing to buy at a higher price. But generally, in a market, we don't charge different prices for different people. Well, in the United States, that's illegal in most cases. There are ways of getting around that law, like movie theaters. They'll sell tickets to seniors at a different price than they'll sell to, somebody who's my age. I'm getting there. I'm going to be a senior eventually. I'm going to buy those senior tickets. But so here's the deal. These people on the upper part of the curve are all getting a deal. They're getting a deal because they are willing to pay more, but they're paying less. So this person right here, because they would be willing to pay more, but they're only paying this amount, this line right here represents the difference between what they're willing to pay and what they are paying. And in economics, there's a name for that. When you pay less, paying less than a buyer is willing to pay. All right? Paying less than a buyer is willing to pay, well, and there's a whole bunch of them. There's all kinds of buyers here. And so there's lots of money that they keep in their pocket. And the money that they're keeping in their pocket, actually, let me change this, paying less than you're willing to pay. That leaves money in your pocket. I want to give you a better definition here. Okay? That leaves a whole bunch of money in their pockets. And all this extra money that they're not spending because they're paying less than they would pay is called consumer, or consumers, I'm going to say consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is all the money that they're not paying that they would pay, money left over because they get to pay a lower price. And now I'm going to say the same thing down here. And by the way, so consumer surplus is represented by this triangle right here. And consumer surplus is a good thing in an economy. Consumer surplus is good. That means that they have extra money left over to go spend on extra utility. That's good for the economy. Now down here, this belongs to the suppliers. See, the suppliers, for each one of these little marks down here along the supply curve, they're willing to sell these quantities at a lower price. If the price was lower, they would still sell these quantities. So as we go from a quantity of 0 up to the equilibrium quantity, the producer is willing to sell that quantity right there at a lower price, and that quantity at that lower price, and that quantity at that lower price. So all this space right in here, the difference between the actual price and what they're willing to sell for, this line right here, that represents extra money that the supplier is earning because they would have sold it for a lower price, but they're able to sell it for a higher price. And that is called producer's surplus or producer surplus. So producer surplus. And producer surplus is good for the economy because the producer is getting some extra money that they can then spend on producing more stuff. So consumer surplus is good for the economy and producer surplus is good for the economy. And when these two things are as large as they can be, that is good for consumers, it's good for producers, and overall good for the economy. Okay? And the way that you can calculate the total consumer surplus and the total producer surplus by simply calculating the area of the triangle that they're in. So let me remind you that the area of a triangle, is equal to 1/2 base times height. Now, These two triangles are both right triangles, so it's really easy to calculate their height and their base. The base is the distance from here over to here. So this is the base for both of them. And the height goes from here, for the consumer surplus, it goes from here up to where the demand curve meets the vertical axis. Okay? So let's say that the equilibrium price is $10. And down here where the supply curve hits the vertical axis, let's say that that's $1. And up here where the consumer surplus or the demand curve, hits the vertical axis, let's say that that's $22. Okay? So if this is 22 and this is 10, then the distance between here and here is 12, because 22 minus 10 is 12. So the height of this triangle is 12. And let's say that equilibrium quantity is, 60. Equilibrium quantity is 60. And the distance between equilibrium price at 10 and down here where the supply curve hits the vertical axis, that's 1. So the distance is 10 minus 1. So this distance, vertical distance, the height of this triangle is 9. So if you want to know what consumer surplus is, all you have to do is do 1/2 times the base. Now the distance from here to here, because the quantity is 60, the base is 60. 1/2 times base, which is 60, times height, which is 12. And if you were to multiply this, half of 12 is 6, and 6 times 60, that's 360. So consumer surplus in this case would be $360. Now here down in producer surplus, the height is 9, and we're going to do 1/2, and then the base is 60. The distance from here to here is 60. That's the equilibrium quantity. So 1/2, 60, times the height of this producer surplus triangle is 9. Well, 1/2 of 60, that's 30. 30 times 9, that's 270. And therefore, producer surplus in this case is $270. And you have to be able to calculate the producer surplus and the consumer surplus. Now we're going to move on to one more thing. We're going to show what happens when a market is inefficient, how it's bad for the market, it's also bad for the economy. Okay, so here we are back at a regular market graph. We've got a demand curve, we've got a supply curve, we've got our equilibrium price, we've got our equilibrium quantity, and you can see that we've got this triangle up here, which is consumer surplus, and down here, here's the triangle. This is the producer surplus. Sometimes in some markets, when outside entities, usually governments, they get involved and they force a price that is either higher than equilibrium price or they force a price that is lower than equilibrium price. A great example of this is minimum wage. Minimum wage is what is called a price floor. And price floors are usually set, the reason it's a floor, usually the equilibrium price is below the floor. But the government says, nope, you're not allowed to pay people less than the minimum wage. And so the price for labor, so this would be a price floor in the labor market if this was the labor market. But let's not jump to the labor market. Let's talk about that later. Just in general, sometimes the government will set a price that is either too high or too low. So let's say that the government forces there to be a price that is too high. The government says, in this market, the price is not allowed to be any lower than this. So even though the forces of supply and demand, buyers and sellers, are going to want the price to be lower, the government will not allow the price to be lower. And therefore, quantity demanded is going to be over here to the left and quantity supplied will be over here. Well, do you remember what we said in one of the previous lessons? Whichever one is smaller, quantity demanded or quantity supplied, that's how much is going to be purchased in the market. And so what's going to happen with this price that's too high is that we are going to have a quantity produced. This is actually going to be how much this quantity demanded. This is how much is going to be produced in the economy. Therefore, we will not produce equilibrium quantity. And here's what that's going to do. Because this is now the price consumer surplus, I got to change some stuff here. I'm going to get rid of this line here, and I'm going to get rid of this line here, because this is now the price, way up here. And so the consumer surplus is always, consumer, you can write this down, surplus is always the region above price and below demand. So you can see right here, above the price, here's the new price. It's too high, but the government says that's where it has to be. The price is here, so above the price and below the demand curve is this little tiny triangle right here. This is consumer surplus in this case. So what should consumer surplus be? Well, if the price was down here, consumer surplus would be much larger. And so when the government sets a price, what's called a price floor, when the government sets a price that's too high for the market, consumer surplus is always smaller. Okay, so if the price is too high, consumer, well, let's do this. Let's put a colon here, because I'm going to put two things here. High, consumer surplus is smaller. Now, producer surplus is the region bounded above by the price. Okay, so it's the region above, or sorry, below, I meant below price. Below price, but above the supply curve. And above supply. All right, so here's the supply curve. Here's the price. So this region right in here. Now you might be wondering about this little triangle over here. Nope. That's not a part of producer surplus, because producer surplus has to stop at the quantity that's actually sold. They may be willing to produce more, but they're not gonna, because the demand is right here. So they're going to stop their production at however much people are going to buy. So this weird trapezoid in here, that's a trapezoid, is called producer surplus. So you might be curious to know what this region is. Well, this is what happens when the government gets involved. When the government gets involved in a market, they create in the market what we call in economics a deadweight loss. Deadweight, that's weight as in lifting weights, deadweight loss. And a deadweight loss is the lost opportunity to provide surplus to consumers and producers. Nobody benefits from a deadweight loss. We could have had more sales in the economy. There could have been more production. There could have been more utility. But because the government stuck its nose in and set a price that couldn't be any lower than this, it results in a deadweight loss. So when the price is too high, consumer surplus is smaller. In many cases, producer surplus is higher. Not always, but sometimes. Is sometimes higher. And then there is a DWL, deadweight loss results. So here's what I need you to be able to do. In this situation, you have to be able to calculate consumer surplus, you have to be able to calculate producer surplus, and you have to be able to calculate deadweight loss. So how would you do this? Well, consumer surplus is easy because it's a triangle, right? So your base, the base of your triangle is going to be your price. So let's throw a few numbers in here. Let's say that equilibrium price would be $10. Would be $10. And let's say up here, this would be, the intersection here is $22. But let's say that the government stepped in and set a maximum price, or a minimum price of $15. Okay? Down here, let's say the supply curve here is actually at, let's say, $3. That the supply curve intersects at $3. Equilibrium quantity would be 60, but actual production is, let's say, 40. Okay? So this is 40, this is 60. Going up, this is 3, 10, 15, and 22. And this is where your critical thinking skills are going to have to come in. Consumer surplus is really easy to calculate. It's a triangle, so it's going to be 1/2 base times height. So consumer surplus will be 1/2, and the base is the distance from here to here. Well, that's the quantity produced. The distance from here to here is quantity produced, because this is 0 and this is 40. So the base of the triangle is 40. The height of the triangle is going to be from 15 up to 22. So 22 minus 15, that's 7. So half of 40 is 20. 20 times 7 is 140. So consumer surplus in this case is $140. I'm going to change colors so that we can do, let's do producer surplus now. Now here's the problem with producer surplus is it's a trapezoid. There's a couple ways of calculating a trapezoid, but in my opinion, if you don't want to memorize the trapezoid formula, then you want to break producer surplus into a triangle and a rectangle. Now, in order to do that, I have to give you additional information. I would have to tell you that, let's say that this point, that this is $5, okay? You would have to know that in order to be able to do producer surplus. So now what we have is a rectangle. So producer surplus is going to be equal to a rectangle, which is base times height, plus a triangle, which is 1/2 base times height. But it's a different base and a different height. So producer surplus is going to be the base and height of this rectangle. Well, the height goes from 5 down here up to 15 up here, and 15 minus 5 is 10. So the height is 10, and the base goes from here to here, which is the quantity 40. So base is 40, height is 10, plus a triangle whose base is, again, 40, but the height goes from 5 down to 3 here, or from 3 up to 5. So that's a base, or that's a height of 2. And so 40 times 10, that's 400. 400 plus 1/2 of 40 is 20, and 20 times 2 is 40. And so producer surplus is 400 plus 40. That's $440 producer surplus. Remember how I said that producer surplus is sometimes higher? It looks like this producer is really benefiting in this case. This producer is benefiting greatly from the government setting a price that is too high for this market. Now you have to be able to calculate dead weight loss. Dead weight loss, as you can see, if you can see, is a triangle, but it's not a right triangle. So we got to put a line through here. That is going to represent the height of the triangle. And I know it's sideways, but that's just the way it goes with triangles. So the base of the triangle will be from here to here. Well, what's the distance from here down to here? This is 15. This is 5. So the base here is 10. So dead weight loss is a triangle. That means it's going to be 1/2 base times height. So it's going to be 1/2. The base here goes from 15 down to 5. That's 10. The height goes from here to here. Well, that's the difference between the actual quantity produced and the equilibrium quantity. So we're going from 40 up to 60, and 60 minus 40 is 20. So it's going to be 1/2 times 10 times 20. So 1/2 of 10 is 5, and 5 times 20 is 100. And so the dead weight loss in this market, because the government stuck its nose in, is $100. So there's a $100 dead weight loss. That's $100 in surplus that could be split between producers and consumers. Okay? I have a supplementary video that I'm going to link inside the description of this video, and it gives you a much better examples for dead weight loss, producer surplus, and consumer surplus. You need to watch that video as a supplement, and that way you'll have a much stronger ability in practicing with calculating dead weight loss, producer surplus, and consumer surplus. But as for this lesson, this is the end. Hopefully you learned a lot here, and let me know if you have any questions.